Welcome to On the Rec Yard, Women's Prison Podcast, where we are live on the...
Oh.
Hey, everybody. It is Wednesday night, and we are on the Rec Yard Women's Prison Podcast. I'm Marcy Marie.
I'm Tunchi.
Tunchi, I am wondering if, there it is, my little message that comes on and says, hey, support me by sending stars. It didn't
Stars.
pop up, and it made me worried that we weren't actually broadcasting. But yes, here we are. It is Wednesday night, and we have an easy, fun time, chat time, story time with y'all tonight. It is an open question and answer episode, and you hear my dog in the background, don't you?
I do. I hear Tony. He's flapping at them
ears. God bless. We see y'all coming in. Hi, Rayanne. Thank you for rocking with us for such a long time, Rayanne, and thank you for watching from YouTube. We're happy to see you, and we appreciate y'all coming in. We appreciate y'all leaving comments. We appreciate y'all liking the live, sharing the live, and if you're listening wherever you hear your favorite podcasters, we love when you leave us a review. Donice girl, we see you. Baby, Donice Cherry been in Vegas and some more stuff.
My party animal is party rocking. She's been boom, boom, banging it across several state lines. So I'm glad she made time for us tonight.
Yeah. When we see our folks get out of prison, sometimes they wild out, especially y'all that were locked up as kids. You wild out just a little bit because
Donice, you stick around because I'm gonna tell y'all a little bit later about me wilding out when I got out after 10 years of being locked up since I was 15.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, they say that like people, like women that have babies, like teenage moms, will sometimes wild out a little bit later in their life. But for sure, it happens with folks that get locked up when they're kids. So Shaquille Oatmeal been rocking it with us for a while, and we're so glad to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we get into our Q&A session, because we want you to ask us questions, y'all, and I'm also going to pull up some of our social media where y'all have been asking things, and we're just it's a free-for-all. You can ask Tunchi anything you want, and she has
I'm going to tell you. I have to tell Marcy too.
We're going to lay it out there.
We're going to lay it out, open book, whatever you want to know. Prisons, about our personal lives, we're going to put it out there. Mental illness, it's out there.
All of it. All the dirty, the raw, the ugly, the raunchy, the trifling. All of it. Just bring on the questions, y'all. But before we do that, let's do this. Hey, Tooch, when that's not real smooth, it means my Wi-Fi is not doing great. I hope that's not the case. God bless. How was your weekend?
Well, my weekend was pretty fantastic. I was here in Austin. We had a training, a Ledge 101 storytelling training with our lead organizers for Lioness. We'll be doing a wider training for the wider community. Marcy and Mandy will be leading that. But me and Chanel did it last Saturday with our folks. And let me tell you, like Donnie said in the chat, there's nowhere else I enjoy more than being with y'all. But y'all, Marcy was sick. She had the flu.
I was dying. Audrey Lee is here. She said, "Are you sick again?" Honey, I'm just not better yet.
It's lingering.
I'm
like
trying.
A bad dream.
Hey, and I need y'all to know something. I was not feeling well, but I was still showering.
God damn it.
And Tooch, you tried to call me out in front of her. Like I wasn't bathing. Shame on you for that.
Now, hold on a second. Before I get to that, I do want to say also Saturday, we got to hang out with Darwin Hamilton, who is a local advocate who has this beautiful mural that is here in Austin that was done to, just really honor him and his family and the work that he's done working um, criminal justice advocacy. So that was really cool, and I can't wait. You'll see some pictures of that and some video of that. But anyway, it was a great time for me. But Marcy was, and hey, I called Brittany. How's Marcy? I didn't want to wake her up. Brittany was like, "Oh, I was looking like, why is Tunji calling me?" Because I was trying not to wake you up.
Well, I do appreciate that, and I will tell y'all, I kept my phone on silent or do not disturb most of the time.
Yeah.
So I tried to utilize that, and I had to tell my family, I had to tell them like, "Hey, if it's an emergency, you can call back to back and it'll push it on through." I know you don't have an iPhone, and I don't even think you probably have that capability, but I have that. So if people text, it'll say like, "Hey, Marcy's turned off her notifications because she's dying in bed with the flu."
Oh. No, I just have a little Android, and it just does what it wants. Well, then what was your week like as you've been recovering from that? Just
I mean,
barely.
the kids got it.
Mm,
The toddler had it. That's all we've been doing since I've seen you last. Truly. That's
God.
it. It's just being sick and getting over it and working from here, making my little graphics and doing my little social media stuff here on the computer. The best that I can while I'm sick.
And I'm like, well, we have our team meeting, y'all, and Marcy's, I'm here, I'm functioning. We get right into it. Now, here's the deal. She said, I got up, I'm functioning, I took a shower, and I said, oh man, Marcy, I feel you. I haven't showered in a day. And she just kind of blew it off. I don't know where I had in my
In a
mind.
public meeting with other people, y'all. It wasn't just me and Tooch, like, "Oh, I feel you. I ain't showered." In a public meeting. And then later in the meeting, she said, "Yeah, I'm like Marcy. I ain't showered in a few days." Interrupt her. The third time she said it, I said, "I don't know why you think I haven't bathed, but I'm showering, ma'am. You're the trifling one that ain't showered. I'm sick, but I'm showering."
Well, sometimes I go days if I'm at this apartment. I do. I do. I do.
Well,
And
we're already getting the questions, and I see I have a toddler crying in the background. And I see Jerry in the comments asking about the extra blankets. Do you know about the extra blankets, Tooch?
well, Jerry, as you know, Miss Jerry, it depends on the unit, right? I haven't heard of anybody get now. I know at Lane Murray, I think Diane was telling me that Juanetta was talking about they weren't getting extra blankets, but it just depends. It just depends.
So we've hunted for like policies. It's not like this blanket policy statewide that the Texas prison system has to issue a second blanket during the winter months. Most of my incarceration, I got a second blanket in the winter. But apparently that's not universal. And also, so I'm not sure if Lane Murray has gotten them or not, but I know a lot of the men's units have not, because I'm just getting a lot of personal feedback in my DMs about family members. Either, my son doesn't have a blanket, or my brother-in-laws don't have extra blankets, and they're cold. Yeah, they're cold. So
Now, Shaquille wants to know, did you get a flu shot?
I didn't. I've never gotten a flu shot my whole life. And I also need you to know, and not because of any political stance or whatever. I don't get sick very often. I don't get sick. And so for whatever, no, I didn't get a flu shot. And also, I don't know that this is a flu. It felt like the flu. I took a COVID test. It was not COVID. I took a couple COVID tests. It felt like the flu, like my whole body was
Mm.
weak. You know how you get when you have that. It was flu-like symptoms. I don't know. Yeah, but no. And my grandmother did get her flu shot, and she has whatever, and she's still in it. Um, so yeah, Johnny Gonzalez is watching from Facebook, and he says, "Where does the money to travel come from? I struggle to pay bills and everyday living after release and in recovery. I always ask myself, where do they find the time and the money?" This is a great question, and I love that you asked it because I think that oftentimes people will see Tunchi and I's personal social media pages and or come on the show and we're in New York or we're in Detroit or we're in Chicago, but we're working. We're not we're not we're not generally traveling with our own money. We're generally um go ahead, Tunch, explain.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's also looking to even when our other friends travel to go, do fun things or you know, sometimes I go visit used to be my pen pal. But that certainly didn't happen the first year I was home. It didn't happen the second year I was home. I had to save money. And then as I progressed in my jobs, and then especially in advocacy work, a lot of times it's like, hey, we have this conference, we have scholarships that will pay for your travel. So it really has been a lot of our traveling and doing things has been saving up money when we can, but for sure, like conference. My friend told me one time, she was like, "Well, you call it vacation, but you're still at work." I'm like, "Girl, boo! It's a free trip to Philadelphia. Yeah, I go to my conference, but me and the girls went out and we had a good time. We went out to eat. Like that's traveling and having a good time, even though it's work. So it's
Yeah.
paid for."
Yeah, it's paid for 90% of the time from other organizations or, if it's some kind of speaking event or if it's at where we're presenting a panel discussion or something like that, those organizations pay for our trip, they pay for our lodging, oftentimes they pay for our food, and sometimes they even pay us depending on what it is, but it's always about learning and making connections. So, it's definitely not that we have this all of this extra income to travel for sure.
Yeah. Rayanne says, has there been any progress in getting the Texas prisons climate controlled? Any steps forward? If Texas could get this done, other southern states would follow. There is the saying, so goes Texas, there goes the nation. Well, we hope to see something. Hopefully, this legislative session just started on January 14th. As y'all know, that we are currently in a lawsuit, our organization, against the prison system about the lack of temperature control. And I personally, Marcy, I don't know this, but we still don't have a ruling from the judge, and that's been since the summertime. And I really feel like strategically, um, what's the point of making a ruling to tell them to do it if session's not in and they can't get the money to do it? So maybe we will see that ruling in the next couple of months as session progresses.
No, that's a great point. So, just for those of you that might not know, we have a federal lawsuit against the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, and it is basically we're basically suing them for housing Texans in knowingly dangerous temperatures. There was a preliminary injunction that our attorneys filed, saying, "Hey, this is like people are dying right now, so we need something to happen now." And that was this last summer. Great hearing, lots of very excellent, important evidence presented. I felt like the judge was gonna I felt like he was gonna come back and say, "You know what? You're right," because he seemed very interested. He was taking notes. And then nothing,
Mhm.
literally nothing.
Yeah.
So I felt like he's waiting for session also.
Yeah. Because without the money to do it, um, TDCJ can't do it. So so it's going to be up to the legislators this session to finally allocate the appropriate amount of money um, to be able to, you know, get the maintenance done to put the air conditioning or whatever temperature control into all the units. So I think we will. I think we will see that. I really do. I want to point out that Audrey Lee says, "I'm sure you always smell good." That's not true, Audrey Lee. I've been with Marcy on trips. I've been with her. I've had to stay with her. It's not always the case.
You are a lie face, too. I don't know why you're hating on me so much. I don't know
because
what
because you can't defend yourself like you normally do. So I feel
you're mad.
emboldened.
You're mad because you're used to the people. Oh, Tunchi looks so handsome.
Oh
Tunchi,
gosh.
do you want me to send you some food? And sweet Audrey Lee is just letting me know a compliment, and you're hating.
Well, I just wanted to be fair to like it's not all the time. It's other times that you've been in an airport for a long time. There's
Girl, we're done. We're done. Jerry, thank you about the Alka-Seltzer night and day tablets. I'm taking them, honey. And believe me, my daddy swears by those, and I appreciate that. We do have a question from Kobe.
Oh,
Did you erase
sorry.
it? Oh,
No, I'm sorry. We did it at the same time.
okay. Did you do time with any infamous people?
Dun,
And we
dun,
get
dun.
this is like a popular question, I think, that we get asked.
Yeah.
And for certain we did. We both were housed on maximum security units. And we were both incarcerated with a lot of high profile cases. Did time with a lot of people that had their own episodes of various television shows, either like Dateline 2020 type shows or Snapped, or even movies, lots of
Lifetime movies.
Lifetime movies even.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, so if there was a woman that did some infamous thing and she's incarcerated in Texas, chances are we know her or we have friends that know her. And guess what? She's just a person. She's just a person. She's not well, and it's kind of like it's almost like Marcy when people talk about celebrities or and we know celebrities, right? They're just people. They're just people. And then you start talking and getting close to them. They're like, oh, this person is just a person. Like, this is not what, except Taylor Swift. That's different. That's a whole level of, like, she's not even human, but she's
But
goddess
everybody
level.
else, everybody else.
But
is
everybody else is, yes, of course. They're just people.
Yeah, yeah. I have been in the have you ever been in the day room with somebody, like, watching TV and their show come on?
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a weird. I mean, it's weird when you're sitting here in your own house and you pull up an episode and you're like, "Girl, look at this episode of Yolanda or Celeste or Tracy Frame, bless her heart, you know." And you're like, well, this feels weird. And then you're sitting with somebody maybe that wasn't locked up. I remember my girlfriend Gina when I lived in Houston. I'd be like, we'd be watching something. I say, girl, I know her, and that is not how that happened. She's like, you know her? I'm like, yeah. Like, you know, I was in prison. Like, but it is another level of surreal when you're sitting there with somebody and you're both watching it, and she's just like, this shit is not true. And everybody's like, why would they say that? Girl, I don't know. I didn't chop their head off and roll it down a hill. That's not what happened.
That's the analogy you came up with?
I just say, because they'll find the most outrageous, salacious detail of something and blow it out of proportion. And then when you come to find out from the person that went through it, They're like, girl, that is not what happened, and that's not what was said. Because in your own history and your own story, like the ways that when I was locked up as a kid, that what happened was so like that is not what went down. That is not what happened, right? So I know that there is some level, and then there are some people that they did chop off their head and roll it down a hill. But you're so like this is the person you live with and eat with. There's this part of you that becomes like not callous to it, Marcy, but like, oh, well, what was that like? Really? Like you just become like you're it's almost like you're desensitized to it, like it happened. So it's very
Yeah.
odd.
Oh, no, for sure. I think that you get desensitized to it. I did time with one of my good friends I did time with. She always made fun of people in prison who were like reading true crime. 'Cause they'd be like, "Talk to your neighbor. You want a true crime story? You're living next to 'em." Like, it's get the real story and not some, narrative, but anyways, yeah, Destiny says, yeah, they were just like the rest of us. I feel that too. Um, I have I have been guilty of binge searching up folks since I've gotten home that I knew had shows that I didn't watch, that I never came across while I was inside. Me and my wife like to do that. I don't know why. I don't share that information like
Yeah.
publicly. Like I don't try to monetize off their story or that's their story or whatever, but it is interesting to me sometimes when I'm like, "Oh, yeah, she had a big sentence. Let's look her up." And then we look it up and we're like, "Oh, yeah, and she was caught up with this." And like it's really interesting to be like, I know that people. I know those folks. And then I will tell you this. I'll end with this talking about infamous people we did time with. My daughters, I have 2 teenage daughters, and they are unimpressed. They don't care. Oh, you went to New York and you got to do this. They don't care. Oh, you're making this television show. They don't none of that. That nothing impresses them. But we're watching Dateline and there's someone on there and I was like, "Oh, I know her. I did time with her." And my youngest daughter said, "No, mom, she was from Corpus Christi." I said, "Yeah, but in Texas, the prison system, we come from all over the state. I know her. I know her well." And she's like, "Wait!" Both of my daughters just completely in awe. "You know that lady?" "Yes, I've known her for years. I know her very well. I've lived with her, worked with her." And they're, texting their friends, calling their grandma. "Mom, no, turn on the TV right now. My mom knows that lady." Like, that's that
They didn't care that you knew Rosie O'Donnell or
flip. Rosie who? They didn't give a flip about that. None of it. "Oh, I got to stay in this mansion. Oh, I got to ride on this yacht." They don't care about any of that, no. But I knew this lady that was on Dateline. Yeah, yeah, so thank you, great question. Um, uh, I was looking, I want to did you see the next question? I see Johnny asking about, what happens, and so I'll go ahead and highlight that. With the mass deportations that are happening right now, is that going to include folks that are in Texas prisons?
well, that already happens. So whenever someone who is not documented is incarcerated, when they come up for release or whether that's parole or just discharge, they are sent to ICE and they're deported. I mean, we have several friends that they were deported straight to other countries. Like it's
Yeah.
immediate. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that I don't think that these new laws are really gonna affect, um, the incarcerated population any differently so far. I don't know anything subject to change, right? But yeah. Uh, Donise, thank you, because she says all those infamous folks we did time with are still human, and we're not here to judge.
We're
And
not.
Destiny says, remember when the whole unit was watching someone's story at Mountain View?
Oh yeah, especially before they took Lifetime away from us. There was always, and I'm going to tell you something. Just speaking on a little bit more on that. A lot of those things were not accurate. Stephanie had an episode. My friend Stephanie had an episode on something. It was like, girl, this is not Stephanie at all. Like, this is so scandalous. But there was one Lifetime movie. And those of y'all that know her, I want to see if you agree with me, that nailed it, that got her personality, her demeanor. And that was the Cadet Story.
I knew
with
you were
Diane Zamora. And Holly Marie Combs that played on Charmed played Diane. And when I watched that, after knowing Diana Zamora and interacting with her and being around her on the unit, I was like, you know what? She really nailed her. Her demeanor, her personality, it was pretty close to it.
Do you know how accurate this story? Like, okay, so what I have gathered just from knowing folks that have shows or books, like almost all of them will say, and this is like including the Menendez brothers, like the Menendez brothers will say, that was kind of true. Like they tried to get it, but it's not quite, and I think that's what everybody, the general consensus is like, Hollywood's gonna do what Hollywood does to make money, and so they're definitely gonna focus on what we all are gonna be like, ooh, and not necessarily the facts. But do you think that they got her story accurate?
Yeah. I think it was one of the few movies that was, of course it was Lifetime, and of course it was, true crime, sensationalism and stuff, but it was one of the few movies that seemed to have really captured the details correctly, and really kind of Holly captured Diane's personality. Now, again, that's subjective to, Diane could say, well, I didn't say that. I didn't do that. That's not the way I behaved. But my interaction with her, it seemed like it was very close to her personality. But other things, you look at Yolanda. I know that everybody is, because Yolanda's up for parole. The person that unalived Selena. And when you watch her documentary off of Peacock, you can feel whatever way you want about Yolanda and what happened, but you do hear another side that made sense, and that you could see, the media, whoever had control of the narrative around what happened, that's the story that got told. And it was, Selena's dad, and it was other people that Yolanda's voice and story was painted, who has control of the narrative essentially, and who's telling the truth.
Yeah.
And so that was always the kind of difficult part, that once the media got a hold of one of our stories, it's a fight for the narrative.
It's kind of that way now, even when we have full control of the story. I do interviews sometimes, and sometimes simple podcast interviews where I'll go back and I listen, and the way that they've edited it and the way that they've laid things out, it twists the narrative. So I can definitely see what that is. I do want to know what show Jerry's talking about, Deadly Medicine. So I'm going to look it up.
Who was that, Jerry? I saw that. Who else? Somebody else mentioned it. Yeah.
She was put in protective custody every time her movie came on.
Donise is saying Deadly Medicine. Who was that? We're going to look right now. Deadly Medicine. True crime. Texas. Let's see.
I just want to know whose story it is. Destiny says,
Janine Jones. It's
"Oh, of
Janine.
course it is."
God bless.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course it is. And I don't remember them putting her in PC when her show was on.
Well, this is, Jerry and Donise were there right when Janine
They
got
were
there.
they were there back in the day. I was there
Yeah.
after Janine was already it had gotten old. Her story had gotten old. Although she was on the Dr. Lane Murray unit when I don't remember if she came up for parole or
Yes, she did. Yes, it was on Good Morning America. Janine had come up for parole and was going to be released because she was under the old law of, mandatory supervision stuff. And at the last minute, lo and behold, we've charged her with another death from 30 years ago. And it's like, looking at Janine's crimes, they were children, they were babies. She was a nurse that had that weird kind of inverted Munchausen's house where she's making children sick to come revive them and be the hero, and babies, there's some babies dying from it. And so it was like, how do we stop her from getting out? And this was under the old law where they had to let her out. Well, they came up and charged her with it. And it's like, well, everybody which was always weird for me, Marcy. I remember watching the Casey Anthony trial when I was locked up, and women that I was locked up with are demanding that this woman be put to death. And I'm like, half of y'all have the same offense. Like, what are we doing here? Right. And in the ways that the evidence against her and the ways it was presented, and there's somebody else that their dad took control, a man took control of the narrative. And so it was always weird to me to watch other women celebrate or demand this kind of bloodthirst over a woman who was on trial for something.
yeah.
And they were like, yeah, Janine don't need to go anywhere, and what she did. And I'm like, girl, what did you do?
Yeah.
It was always so weird.
Yeah, we were all in there for something, that's for sure. And there was a lot of bigger crimes or whatever that I don't know, but I'm with Donise. We weren't really there to judge, and I didn't want to know sometimes. And sometimes I regretted finding out people's crimes while we were in there, because it made it more challenging to see somebody as a person and not for their action. And that's what I ask of people, of me, every day outside of prison, is that when people talk to me or interact with me, they don't see the worst thing that I've ever done, that they see me for who I am. And so yeah.
Because
And
when you start digging, you see so much more than what happened, right? Like, Janine Jones is a sick woman. She's mentally ill. That doesn't make it right. What happened doesn't make it right. Those parents and those children's and the trust that, the medical community put in her, like, no, that we're not making an excuse. But when you start digging back the layers, well, you take Celeste Johnson, who had a pretty notorious crime. You start digging back the layers of these people aren't evil. They're mentally ill. They're mentally ill the same way I was as a 15-year-old. And so how do we balance how do we have accountability and justice at the same time? And to watch other women or other incarcerated people just demand this punishment when they're sitting. I don't know if it was a sense of, well, if I got to be here and I did something, you got to be here too. I mean, I don't know. It was weird. If we're asking people to, like you said, to look past the worst things that we've done to who we really are, then we have to be willing to, it's all of us or none of us, right? Isn't that what we say?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, yes, yes. Celeste Johnson was another infamous Lifetime movie book person that you and I both know from incarceration. Yeah, and yeah. Okay. Moving along. Johnny Gonzalez is saying, "Why do they lock the prison system down when someone escapes?" He said that we spent 4 months on lockdown when that one guy escaped and was caught 2 days later in Chicago. I don't I can guess what their reasoning is because I don't know, like, I haven't read something that says, "We locked down the prisons because of this," but I think it's to keep, um, people in check. So I think one reason probably is the prisons that are closer to that escapee, um, those they're gonna be shorter staff because staff are then out in the community looking for this escaped person. But also, I think on a bigger scale, it's to keep people from rising up. Like, I
Yeah.
think it's to keep people in check. Uh,
Because then everybody gets, have you ever seen, Cool Hand Luke? God, I love
yeah,
Cool Hand
yeah.
Luke, right? And so they called it, getting rabbit, like, as something will happen, like the guy's mom died, and it's like, "Well, we're gonna put you in the hole and lock you down," because a lot of times you start getting rabbit blood when something happens, you get antsy and you might do something impulsive. And so, yeah, I think you're right. Like, okay, get them all locked down, situated, accounted for. We got to make sure nobody else is gone and make sure that we have immediate control of the situation. I see yes. Let's lock them down.
There were a
And
couple times when other incidents would happen statewide, like a few pretty vicious attacks on staff
mhm.
that they would lock down. I don't remember a couple times. I remember one time that our unit was locked down when something that had happened on a men's unit across the state, a pretty vicious attack, on a
That
female
lady in the kitchen.
officer.
Yep. We all got locked down for that.
Yeah, yeah, um, yeah, that was horrible, um, for sure, but yeah, and I think that that was that same kind of to keep everybody from
Controlled
rising.
so we don't lose control of, you know,
Yeah,
people
yeah,
start
yeah.
going off.
Taylor said we had that cell phone lockdown. Are you
Oh.
talking about when the guy called and made the threats
Oh
to
yeah. To Senator Whitmire on death row. Yeah, everybody did. Boy, that was a long time ago. I was out the first time. They were
that was
like,
a long time ago.
everybody got locked down because somebody called Senator Whitmire and threatened him from death row. And it was like, why would you threaten him? At the time, he was a real Democrat. Now, see, I'm going to get in trouble here. We talk
Yeah,
about
there you
politics
go.
by name, then I'm going to get the knock on the door.
Yeah, yeah. Moving right along.
Right? Marcy's like, I ain't got nothing to do with that.
Mary Stockton says, "The man with the eyes." What do you mean, Mary? Are you I'm so confused.
Maybe is that a movie?
If it is, uh, we should know about it. We do. Taylor's comment made me think about we got locked down, the whole unit got locked down one time because, we had this teacher who was pretty eccentric.
Okay.
She was like this fashion lady, older Black lady that would wear very eccentric jewelry and hats and, a really fun teacher, and the staff couldn't stand her because guess what? She treated us politely. Like, she treated us like we were, I don't know, people,
People. Yeah, and
and there were
she brought saw this vibrancy into y'all's
yes.
lives.
Yes. Anyway, she had this brooch on, and it was apparently some kind of big metal thing, and sometime during the day, she realized it was missing, and when she reported that it was missing, they locked down the unit because they were worried that it could have been, like, used as a shank or transformed into some kind of weapon. And they shut the whole unit
God bless.
down. All the officers were out, like, looking in the grass, walking to and from, they were shaking people's cubicles down, And then the lady at the end of her day goes to her car, and it was in the floorboard of her car. And we had been locked down for that brooch.
God. I know she felt bad though. Like, oh man. Oh man. I want to ask Taylor. You were on Riverside and she said the Nightingale Grapist guy. What are you talking about, the guy that worked in the kitchen that ended up being the guy that was breaking in and assaulting sexually older women, like old ladies? And they called him
Wait,
like the Nightingale or the night. And
he
it was
was
in
a
Gatesville. It was in
officer?
Gatesville. He was a kitchen boss on Riverside.
See, the only kitchen bosses I knew that they just messed around with the people that lived there.
No, come to find out, he was the actual person that was
Wow.
doing this to these older women in Gatesville, breaking into their homes in the middle of the night. And he was
Oh,
a
God.
kitchen boss. Yep, that happened. God bless.
Wow. Mary said she was talking about Cool Hand Luke, honey.
Oh, the man, the man with the eyes, with the beautiful icy blue eyes, Paul Newman.
Julie, I see you in the comment section, honey. Please stay in contact with us. And if you're going to the halfway house in Austin, stay in contact with us and maybe message me after this show. And so I can make sure that you have a phone and everything. Thank you, AIC's Advocate, for reminding folks for hitting that like button and sharing the live and commenting, all of those things. And Taylor worked for that grapist, the Nightingale.
Oh, honey,
Isn't
I'm
that
sorry.
wild?
That's wild.
We do have a question from AIC's Advocate. Have the problem have the drug problem. I can't read between the lines, apparently. I appreciate you trying to not mess with the algorithm here. And just yeah, I'm just so slow that I didn't get it. Has the digital mail situation transformation lowered the amount of drugs inside the Texas prisons?
No. Nope.
No.
Because it's the staff that brings the drugs in. It's the staff that brings the drugs in.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
In fact, we get more reports of drugs showing up in women's prisons that wasn't even an issue before.
Yeah.
Now than we have ever gotten.
Yep.
Dare I say it has increased in women's prisons. But in men's prisons, people are overdosing all of the time. They're getting caught up with drugs. Same problem. Guess what? It wasn't coming in through the mail.
It's the staff. It's the staff. I mean, really, the key moment for me, honestly, really was that Advocate call that Hank from the prison show asked the prison official. So y'all have stopped visitation and mail, because during COVID, there was a time for about a year, there was no physical mail and there was no physical visits. So has your drugs decreased? And the answer was no. And he said, okay, so what does that tell y'all? And that was the last time we had one of those phone calls. Yeah. Yeah.
And TDCJ stopped answering the phone. No.
Right.
Well, yeah,
They were like, oh, next time we're just going to answer very specific questions. I mean, because it's true. And they know
Right.
it's true. Now, how do you manage that? Well, there's lots of, we could get into a whole episode about that, but it is not family members. Does it come through the mail? Has it come through the mail? Yes. Is that the predominant way it comes in? No, it's not. It's not.
Does contraband come in through visitation? Has visitors been caught with throwing packages over the walls and all of this wildness and drones even? Yes. Is that where the majority comes from? No.
Oh, right.
No. Are there officers getting rich off of, illegal substances inside of Texas prisons? Yes, 100%,
Yeah, because at the
100%.
men's unit, I mean, if you're making, you know, the salary that an average CO is making, and somebody's offering to give you cash, wads of cash, it's tempting. It would tempt anybody, I think, like it just speaks to the whole problem of, well, the whole system, right? The whole system.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is. It's all of it. It's poor working conditions, overworked, underpaid staff, not a rehabilitative environment for people in recovery or wanting to be in recovery. I mean, just the whole thing, for sure. Marcy, I would have messenger pigeoned you some MAC eyeliner.
Mm.
Audra Lee, that's why you're my bestie. Out with Tunchi, in with Audra Lee, because you wouldn't have done that for me, Tunch.
You're a
You would
liar. Your face is lying right now. It's telling dirty, filthy, horror lies.
you would have smuggled me some eyeliner in there. You
I
would
would
have
have
paid
made sure.
somebody to do it. Get away from
Okay.
me. Johnny,
What's the difference? Did you get the goddamn eyeliner or not? That's it. And I'm helping somebody else out to do a skill that I'm not good at.
Johnny, here we are, Johnny. Gonzalez says, I was released in 2009. By then, commissary items were smaller and more expensive. Holiday meals went from 2 plates to 1. They had done away with dessert. 45 or more had to do mandatory 10 years in closed custody. And no hot lunches on the weekends. What else have changed? What else has changed?
Well, I think there's been a few good changes, small incremental changes for women, directly related to our advocacy work. I do believe that. I do see that. What continues to worsen? Um, medical care and conditions of confinement. Certainly, right? And you're right. Like food budgets went down. There was a legislative and here's the deal. And I am by no fan of our Texas prison system. But what I do, me and Marcy have tried to tell people over and over, so much of what happens, the legislators are responsible for. Those cuts and slashes to food budgets, when we started seeing state jails were eating twice on the weekend instead of 3 times, when we're seeing certain food items taken away and our whittling food budget, that was from the legislators. That was I want to say the 83rd, 84th. I remember I was working in the library and I'd keep up with the updates of session in the Austin paper. Those things came from the legislature. The increase in the copay, the fact that you have a copay while you're in prison for your medical care, that came from the legislature. TDCJ was not responsible for any of that. The legislators were. So they do what they can with what they have within their prison culture, right? That never helps, but they also are at the mercy of whatever budget the legislators give them.
Well,
put the blame where it goes.
This is true. This is true. And honestly, that's why there's no climate control. It's because of the legislators. But I wanted to say, I on the Telford unit right now, their G4s are on disciplinary lockdown. And I think some of our women are in disciplinary lockdown right now, if I'm remembering correctly. And those disciplinary lockdowns, like they can be locked down for up to 30 days, but your time starts over if there's another incident. So if there's any kind of like a violent incident, if roommates fight, if somebody doesn't rack up when they're supposed to, if somebody spits at an officer, or but they're starving. Those
Mm,
guys are starving, and I was on disciplinary lockdown on the Dr. Lane Murray unit in G4, and I remember being so hungry. They're not getting fed enough food. The food that they're getting in those Johnnies is horrible. They're not getting hot meals. The sergeant came by today and told them they were asking like, when are we going to shower? And she said, y'all aren't going to shower. How about that? Completely against policy.
mhm. Yeah.
Completely against all of that. I mean, I'm like looking up the policies to make sure I'm not just remembering wrong, like looking up to see what a disciplinary lockdown shower policy is, and it's 3
Mhm.
times a week,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, and
They
I I think you remember during COVID when you were at Lane Murray, how little food y'all were getting and how y'all didn't have hot food for a long time.
Oh, honey, we were starving, and we weren't getting, for probably a year, we didn't get commissary, uh, and then we started getting, like, hygiene and writing material. I mean, so everybody was out of all their food in their box. We were getting fed these Johnnies, and sometimes, like, they would cut the bologna
Mm.
and freeze it in these big barrels, so it would be like a barrel of these slices of bologna, and then they would pull it out to make the sandwiches, and it would not be thawed out yet, so they would put this frozen piece of bologna on the bread, and then it would defrost,
And
and the
soggy
bread would
bread.
be like glue
Mhm.
pasted on either side of the bologna. It was really close to inedible, and those peanut butter sandwiches, I remember you would just open up the bread, and it would be this little tiny
Right. Middle.
roll of peanut butter-y substance, you know, and I remember just, like, getting a spoon and just eating that,
Yeah.
trying to we were hungry all the time. We would get super excited if it was anything that we could halfway heat up in our hot pot because we'd get it and it'd be cold,
Mhm. Mhm.
you know? And so if it was like a burger or something that I could put in a couple chip bags and put in my hot pot, we would get excited about that.
Yeah.
Those little beef patties that weren't even really beef, like, it was rough. We were hungry. Man,
Mhm.
man, we were hungry, and we were confined to our cubicle, and we weren't told anything about what was going on. The staff was treating us like we were completely contaminated. Uh,
Gosh,
yeah.
and I'm sure the fear that y'all would have as soon as somebody in the dorm would get sick.
Oh, yeah. Well, the the first couple cases, we thought those girls were gonna die. We didn't
Mm.
know it was COVID. Nobody said it was COVID. They took them and put them in seg and then brought them back. Uh, and then later we realized, oh, that was the first COVID case. Like that was I remember, like, this absurdity that we can't be in the day room together watching TV or outside on the rec yard together, but we're all using the same like, all 100 of us are using the same 9 toilets.
Right.
Um
And eventually y'all could go to work and strip in the kitchen, but not
Right,
be in the day room together.
right. We could work with people in other dorms in the kitchen. Kitchen workers were cross-contaminating. Like, it was a big failure of trying to contain a virus, a huge failure,
Yeah.
and we weren't given cleaning supplies until months in. Months. Like, we weren't given anything to disinfect our living space, our little cubicle area.
God.
And then they would start bringing in, like buckets of bleach, and you would go up and get in line with your little cup, and they would give you some bleach water.
God.
You would wipe it down. Yeah,
Watered ass down. Probably wasn't even the right ratio.
I mean, yeah, it was it was wild. 6 months in or so, they started doing temperature checks, and everybody would be panicky because if you had any kind of fever, they would take you and put you in solitary confinement.
And lock your dorm down.
Eh, yeah, we were still locked down at this I mean, those temperature checks, I don't know. Yeah, it was wild. It was really something. There was
Yeah.
a we would convince there was one TV that would face the bedroom area, and of course, it's 4 rows of cubicles, 25 beds, so past the 8th bed, none of them can see the TV, and I think I'm, like, in 20 I don't know, I was not in TV range, but we watched that show. It was about that guy who got his, um, attorney he went to school to be an attorney and got his license while he was locked up, whatever show that was. I think 50 Cent helped produce that show. Um, and we would convince if we had a good law, they would turn it on, and I remember, like, crawling down underneath the camera, and I would sit right there in front of somebody's bunk out of the camera range and look up at the TV, and when the law would come in the door, she'd be like, "Go, move," and I'd crawl back to my cubicle, like
Wild.
yeah, yeah, it was really something. Golly.
Well, it took you down memory lane while you're sitting there coughing and sniffling. And can you imagine being sick like you were this weekend in prison? I remember I was one time, me and Alexa were, and it's like, Jesus, thank you. While in one hand, I'm so grateful. Me and Mandy were talking about just gratitude earlier today. Like, I'm so grateful. But then when I stop and think, then my mind goes towards people that don't have that and who are still there. And it just hurts me. It hurt me when y'all were going through that with COVID. We out here, we were in pure panic. Like the feeling of not being able to get to any of y'all or to do anything, and then knowing what y'all were going through and feeling was just it would make me feel like I couldn't breathe.
The fact that nobody would say there was never a time where they were like, "Hey, this is why you wanna up the hygiene game right now. Hey, this is what's going on." N They just cut off TVs, cut off our phone calls. People would be getting, like, JPay messages from the free world, and we'd, like, pass it around because they'd be like, "This many cases in Houston, these schools are shut down, these it's locked down here." And we felt like it was the end of the world. We
Mhm.
felt like it was the end of the world. Taylor, they didn't make us get vaccinated. So, I left in 21. When I left, so it was still COVID was still happening, um, vaccinations became available for higher risk populations, and they were volunteer. So if you were elderly or if you had maybe, diabetes or something that might make your immune system more susceptible, then those they were offered. Okay, but we didn't get educated about those
Mm.
vaccinations. So we don't trust prison medical.
Right, right, yeah.
And then there's no education around, so nobody was getting them voluntarily. Okay, so then after I left, um, they started doing some things like, all visitation is closed, but if we can get this percentage of the unit vaccinated, we'll open up visitation. And then they started this, if you get vaccinated, you could get an ice cream.
Right, I remember that.
Um, so they were trying to incentivize it, but again, they weren't educating anyone.
Right.
We barely understood, like, we didn't know we didn't know squat. The laws were coming in full PPE equipment. Sometimes the officer would come in and count the first time of her shift, and we were locked down, so nobody was coming or going,
And never come back in.
and never come back in
You
because
know, the girl,
they wanna
I
get
was
sick.
gonna, yeah, I was gonna tell you the girls at Hobby were like, first of all, TDCJ said there's no cases at Hobby, and we're a year into the pandemic, right? And we're like, that's not true, because we had already heard how sick they were there. The girls were telling us they would come in with that bag with all the Johnnies, they'd have that big bag with all the Johnnies. The officers would open the door, throw the big bag with everybody's in there, throw it in there and shut the door. I said, you mean they're not even counting? She said, girl, they don't come in here to count. They don't even come in here to pass these Johnnies out. They open the door and throw it in and shut it real fast. So we're
Yeah.
all just trusting each other to pass out Johnnies. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, it was savage, girl. They would roll the Johnny cart into the dorm, and you would have to stay racked up, and the officer would be in the picket row, cubicles 1 through 25, come get your Johnny, but she wasn't in there, and you'd go get it. Like, it was off the chain. It was savage. It was savage. And I mean, I remember just lots of times I've always kind of whatever had like a zombie attack plan, like if the zombies attack. And it's not necessarily zombies, it's just whatever end of the world type shit. What would I do? But I remember in prison just thinking, this is it. We'll just die.
There's no way to get out of here. There's no way to, it's just it.
Yeah.
Boy,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
took it all the way we took it all. You told everybody when we started we were going to have a fun, good time telling stories and laughing.
After
And
COVID. Yeah. I don't know how that happened.
Now nobody, go ahead.
Nobody would.
I was going to say, now nobody ask us any personal questions. I'm going to give y'all one last call here.
It is.
That if you have
2 minutes after the hour, honey.
If anybody has anything they want to ask about Marcy Marie, please, this is your chance to ask it. Now, she told us that she bathes. I don't know if I necessarily believe that all the way. I'll ask Brittany. But this is y'all's last chance. I don't care what the question is. You can ask. That's what she said earlier. So we're going to give y'all a minute or two to get your question in.
While you're thinking of your question, I will tell you that during COVID, when we were locked down, because again, you're sleeping next to people this close.
Yeah.
But you're locked down. We're all breathing the same air in this small, like it was silly for us to be locked down, or so at least we felt. Anyways, we played dominoes. I had a domino set from the games that I wasn't supposed to have. And we would get in my cubicle because the camera was right above my cubicle and it overshot it. So you could duck down and go into my cubicle without the camera seeing it. And we would sit in there and play 42. Deja
Well, I bet
Ramos.
you played. I bet y'all played a lot of 42, passing a lot of time.
We played a lot of 42. And the law would come in the door and everybody would duck down and crawl back to their.
I love that.
Yeah. My mama says I do bathe. Thank you very much.
Well, she's your mama and she loves you.
Rayanne says, how many children are you raising and are they grandchildren? Great question, Rayanne. My wife and I have my nephews, her brother's babies. Mom is in recovery, trying to get it together. They've been with us for a year. Dad is in prison. And so there's just 2 kiddos living here. I have 2 daughters who are not grown yet. They live with their dad, and I see them as much as possible. But they're high schoolers, and then the rest of my kids are grown. Great question. Thank you for that, Rayanne. So yeah, that little toddler is my little nephew, little
He's
wild
a
man.
cutie.
Yeah. Okay, Tunch. The wrap. That was it.
That was it.
Rayanne,
That's a wrap.
the last
Yeah.
question.
I know. I was waiting for someone to ask something revealing and
You were hoping
embarrassing.
for a raunchy story, but you're not getting it this time, honey. Y'all, we will be back here next week, 7:00 Central Standard Time. We are on the Recyard Women's Prison Podcast. And thank y'all for everything. Tunch, I'm just waiting for you to say something. Here we go.
Thank y'all for hanging out with us on the Recyard Women's Prison Podcast with Marcy Marie and Tunchi.